a lot of the things that might irk us as foreigners who grew up in a foreign culture society are what we have to accept and understand is just a part of Japan. What is good, everyone? Welcome to the channel. My name is Paul. I make videos about Japanese society, life, and culture from the viewpoint of a long-term foreign resident. I've been in Japan for 20 years now, and today's topic is one question that I asked a number of my friends and acquaintances here who have lived in Japan for almost as long or longer than I have. And the question was this: if you were emperor for a day and you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about Japan, what would you change? Now, in the effort of fairness and balance, I'm going to be doing a second part to this video, which will be asking Japanese people the very same question. And before I get into the things that my friends and acquaintances responded with, I do want to make the one important caveat that this is not people complaining about Japan. There's going to inevitably be someone in the comments who's going to say, you shouldn't complain about Japan, you're guests in their country, or if you don't like it, you should go back to where you came from. Well, first of all, I asked them to do this, so it's not like they were coming out and saying, well, I don't like this about Japan. I asked them, what would you change? And that's based on the simple premise that nowhere in the world is perfect for everyone, nor in the world is perfect for anyone, actually. And to not like everything about the place where you are is completely normal. I don't think my hometown where I grew up is perfect, and I wouldn't expect anyone who moved there to say it's perfect or get out. It doesn't make any sense. One of the interesting things about this was I asked quite a number of people this question, and there were very few repeat answers, which just goes to show that there's different things on different people's minds. In fact, there were only two things that were mentioned by more than one person. The first thing that was mentioned by more than one person was dual citizenship. Japan should allow dual citizenship. And the reasons they gave, and the reasons I would give because I agree with them, is that right now Japan has a demographic problem. It's not having enough people, not enough births, aging society, population is dropping, and it's kind of shooting yourself in the foot by not allowing dual citizenship. Not just for foreigners like me who might hesitate at taking Japanese citizenship because I'd have to give up my original citizenship to do so, but also the Japanese people who travel abroad and live abroad for some reason and lose their Japanese citizenship because they took citizenship elsewhere. In fact, there's been a court case recently of a Japanese woman who, I think she took Canadian citizenship but returned to Japan to take care of an ailing relative, and basically she discovered that she overstayed her tourist visa because her citizenship had been revoked because she'd become Canadian, and she's suing the Japanese government saying that this is a breach of her rights by the Constitution and that sort of thing. But regardless of whether it is within the constitutional right of Japan to do this or not, I think it would be a good thing for Japan to actually change this, because I really can't think of a really strong reason why you shouldn't be allowed to have more than one citizenship in this day and age. Like, what benefit does that afford Japan? I don't know. If you can think of a benefit like that, please let us know in the comments. And of course, please feel free to comment on any of these, and I invite you to go ahead and answer this question yourself. If you're Japanese and watching this, well, of course, feel free to comment, although maybe hold off answering the question yourself until the next video, which will be asking Japanese people specifically. The second thing that more than one person mentioned was one that kind of surprised me. Again, I agree with it, but I don't think it's so dire that it would be the one thing I'd change. But more than one person mentioned that the law should be upheld in Japan, and that the police should do their duty to ticket or stop people who are riding their bicycles on sidewalks. There is an actual law on the books in Japan that if a sidewalk is smaller than 2 meters wide, like the one I'm walking on here, you're not allowed to ride your bicycle on it. You have to be in the street like any other vehicle. And let's be honest, there's not a whole lot of 2-meter wide sidewalks in Japan. They're mostly like this. But everyone rides their bicycle on the sidewalk, and the police don't do anything. It's one of those laws that is not enforced. But these people mentioned that it should be enforced because it would make Japan safer. Like the way bicyclists weave in and out of pedestrians, the way they use pedestrian crossings as if they're pedestrians, which makes it tougher for drivers to stop and, you know, properly let pedestrians through, because it's one thing to have someone walk up to a pedestrian walk and you stop and let them go, and another thing to be aware of a full speed bicycle that might come out of nowhere and use the pedestrian crossing. It's just a matter of different speed of use, right? And it makes it more dangerous. I especially, as a driver myself, dislike the bicyclists who are in the road as a vehicle, but once they reach the pedestrian crossing, they magically become a pedestrian and cut in front of me, and it's just dangerous. They don't signal, so I don't know. As far as I know, they're going to keep going straight on the road, but now suddenly they're a pedestrian, and you have to just be ready for that as a driver. It is dangerous. There were some education-related ones that came up, and one of them was that high school should become compulsory in Japan. You may not be aware of this, but in Japan, compulsory education is only through junior high school, and high school is then, you know, taken by choice, although something like 97% of Japanese do go on to high school. However, because it's not compulsory and it's not supported by the government in the same way, it can be quite an expense for parents to send their children to high school, and not just going to the school itself, but like getting into the high school and taking the tests, going to cram schools to get the necessary knowledge to get into a good high school, etc. And that could become more and more of a financial burden on parents, was what this friend told me. So making high school education compulsory and the government paying for it would be the one thing he would change. Another one from another educator was change the system so there's not so much pressure for or punishment for making mistakes. As language teachers, this is one thing we have to wrestle with all the time, which is somehow the system makes Japanese students really fear making mistakes, either out of embarrassment or standing out because their English wasn't perfect or something. And as a result, that's why we have so many students who don't try to practice their English, because if it's not perfect, they don't want to speak out loud. And of course, you can't get good language skills unless you practice, so it's a defeating cycle, right? So he would wave the magic wand and somehow change the system so that students aren't as afraid of making mistakes. A third take on education was to wave the magic wand and make Japan's system more like Finland's. And I had to reply saying, I don't know anything about Finland's education system. So he went on to explain further that it seems to be more interested in practical skills and teaching all of the subjects with very practical applications associated with them, whether it's mathematics or language or whatever, and less emphasis or almost no emphasis on rote memorization, which is very strong in the Japanese school system. So that's what he would change. Finally, there was one person who said that he would abolish the bukatsu system, or the system of after-school club activities that exist in they kind of start in elementary school but don't really come into force until junior high school, and then in high school as well. And I asked him to explain why he was against bukatsu, these club activities like baseball or brass band or whatever it might be. And okay, his answer was so thorough that I wouldn't do it justice if I tried to explain it from memory, so I'm just going to read what he had to say. Now, he prefaces this by saying that he doesn't come at this like he's trying to be some kind of savior of Japan or anything. It's just something that he personally would prefer not to exist. And he says, Now, I'm not sure that I really believe this, because it does have a lot of positive attributes. It gives kids that might not otherwise be able to afford something. It gives them access to quality sports training, gives kids a sense of purpose, keeps teenagers healthy. However, the negatives outweigh the positives. My main problem with it is it trains children to obey arbitrary authority from a young age and to accept unearned hierarchy. It inculcates the senpai-kohai system, in which the authority of someone even a few months older is completely unquestioned and uncompromised, regardless of experience, skills, or knowledge. It forces the kohai, or the junior, to accept bad ideas that they know are bad, and the authority of idiots simply due to age difference. At the same time, it encourages senpai to act as tyrants and to relish unquestioned power. This is deliberately training for them to be good, obedient citizens and employees that never question their bosses or the status quo of society. Those crucial years between the start of middle school and the end of high school are when teenagers are developing their identity, experimenting with different ideas, styles, ways of doing things, and Bukatsu cuts this off at the source. It imposes traditional gender roles. The most obvious example is the sports team managers, that are roles done exclusively by girls, and they don't do any form of management whatsoever. They are like a mother or housewife, carrying water and even washing uniforms. So yeah, it goes on a little bit more than that, but you get the idea. So he would abolish Bukatsu. There were a couple of ideas from friends talking about nature. One of them is one I've actually talked about on the channel, which is the horrible way in which they trim trees in the cities, where they essentially just hack off everything so that the trees end up looking like these zombie sticks that will eventually like grow these little spindly things come the next spring. And of course there are reasons to trim trees in Japan, or anywhere really. For example, it is good for the health of the tree to be trimmed in some respects. And in a country with typhoons, like having large, heavy limbs that could fly off and fall and cause damage in a typhoon is an issue. But I did talk to our landscaper, the person who basically created our yard. I asked him, why the cities trim trees like this, and he said it's because they don't know what they're doing. I mean, they give the job to the lowest bidder, and the lowest bidder is not like someone who's really experienced and loves nature and loves tree trimming. It's just some company that has chainsaws and ladders, and they'll do it for cheap, and so they go up and hack off everything essentially. So that's not just our opinion. It's an actual professional gardener who says that, yeah, they just do a bad job. The other one that was mentioned that had to do with nature was this person would wave the wand and up the respect by Japanese for nature and not dump trash in the forests and along the mountain roads. Everyone always exclaims how clean the cities are in Japan, and they are, and I've argued that they are clean because people won't litter around other people, because it's seen as causing trouble for others to leave trash around, and so the cities are clean. But the forests are out of sight, out of mind. You can pull over your car, throw a bunch of stuff down into the ditch, and drive away, and you haven't caused anyone any trouble except maybe some deer or a squirrel or something. So, and who cares? So yeah, there is a lot of dumping that happens out in the countryside, and that's really unfortunate. And this person would use their magic powers for the good of nature. I'm going to finish up with 3 more that I think actually kind of permeated a lot of the messaging I got from my friends on this issue, or this question rather, which is a lot of them had a strong awareness that the things they were suggesting could very well, if they were magically put into place, cause negative side effects or negative things to happen, or even change Japanese culture itself in a way that they might regret this. So it's like a pet peeve for them, or something that they wish was different about Japan, but at the same time maybe don't really wish is different. kind of like my friend who talked about the Bukatsu club activity, saying that it obviously has some benefits, and so he's not entirely sure that it would be a good idea to get rid of it. But one of the things that was mentioned by a friend was getting, actually now that I think of it, it was two people who mentioned this, because I just got a new message this morning, someone who finally answered my asking of the question, and these two people talked about getting rid of the rigidity of doing everything in an absolutely precise way, that everything has to be done how it's always been done, and there's no flexibility in the system, or there's no like this way, this shortcut actually makes us work smarter, not harder, and those kind of things are rejected. And both of these people acknowledge, though, that if you got rid of this rigidity, or if you made Japanese society more flexible oriented or flexibility oriented, that it would probably just completely alter the society so much that it wouldn't really be Japan anymore, because then you'd lose like the attention to detail and the exacting measures that Japanese put into their work, and so you'd have this ripple effect of society being less organized, less structured, less clean, less orderly, all of those things that Japan is famous for and are a good thing for Japanese society. So it's kind of, it's a double-edged sword, so to speak, and because Japan is incredibly rigid, that can sometimes cause problems or issues. But obviously it also helps keep a lot of good things about Japan intact. Another one that was mentioned by a good friend was she would get rid of the honorific language and the top level of polite language in Japan, being that it kind of reinforces or makes those structures of hierarchy that my other friend mentioned when it came to bukatsu and clubs, that it enforces these unequal power arrangements that are not necessarily based on anything except like age or amount of time that's been spent on in a company or on a hobby or something. The fact that you have to use this honorific language also affects how genders speak, so it is reinforcing like specific gender norms that are a little bit old-fashioned, and that also keep women in a subordinate role because of how the language works. So she would do away with that, but at the same time she's like, but you would be losing something essentially Japanese if that were to actually magically disappear. And so would Japan be Japan anymore? It might be more bad than good if this were to be done, because the politeness of the language again leads to the orderliness of society and everyone knowing how to act and react and just be in social situations in Japan, because you just know that you use this language in this situation. It's formulaic, and that's how everything runs pretty smoothly. So yeah, that might be lost if that level of language was lost. Probably the main message that I get out of the answers that I got, which is people took this question really seriously and were really thoughtful about it, and we're just cognizant of the fact that a lot of the things that might irk us as foreigners who grew up in a foreign culture society are what we have to accept and understand is just a part of Japan, and without these things Japan wouldn't be Japan. At any rate, I want to thank you so much for watching this video, and if you want to support me directly, I do have a Patreon that you can join. I will be dropping a video over there soon about my Japanese language learning journey, and that will be an exclusive Patreon video at first. So if you want to see that, please join over there. You can find me on Instagram. It's just at Exjapter over there, so the same name as the channel here on YouTube. So go follow me over there. At the end of the day, hitting the like button, subscribing, and sharing my videos is the single best package of ways to support the channel and get my content out to more people who might be interested in this kind of deep dive into Japan. And look for next week's video, which will be part 2, Japanese people answering the same question. What would they change about Japan if they had a magic wand for a day? All right, thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you then. Peace. Okay, the second thing that more than one person mentioned was, shit, what was it?